Hi, I'm just waiting for our guest to join in. And he's here. Hello.
Hey, Jacqueline.
So the link worked okay.
The link ended up working. I haven't used this service before, so I had to do some registration and stuff. But
Yeah. I'm also
yeah,
new with it and new with going live on the platforms. It's part of my
and
100-day experiment.
I could see you for a second, but then you just disappeared.
Um, Let
Yeah.
me see if I can change the layout. If I change it to side by side, maybe? Because I made you big, but I can unmake you big.
Oh
Oh,
yeah,
there we go.
yes, yeah. No, yeah,
I'm
great.
also getting
How are you
used to
doing?
the platform. I'm doing great. So I kind of roped you into my small, overly ambitious project, which is kind of things that I like to do. So I know that you've spent a lot of your life working on design and working on big problems, and I think you always have really interesting input to that kind of process. And when I was kind of designing this 100-day project, because the 100 days project goes on every year. This is like the 10th year. And normally it's like an art collective thing. So like one time I did watercolors, one time I did thank you notes. So I did like 100 thank you notes by hand. And this time I was thinking, I really need to do something that's more focused in my area of expertise where I really want to make a difference. And I think that with all of the challenges that are facing the maritime industry and the ocean industries as a whole, so everything aquaculture, energy, coastal ports, ships, there's so much that has such a big impact on the world and needs to change quite drastically for us to reach, both ecological ambitions, sustainability ambitions as far as food and transport and fuel transitions and energy transitions overall. It's just amazing the amount of stuff that we actually need to change, and how can we design that change to do it collaboratively together. So I wanted to talk to you about how to set up designing these kind of big transformations, whether you wanted to set it up designing small things like most people think design is, to designing businesses and designing interactions and designing then full businesses and then extrapolating that further, which I don't think has been done, which is what this is about, is how do you design an industry and how do you design for those stakeholders in that kind of complex environment. Not to put you on the spot
Exciting.
to have to really answer it.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm flattered to be asked, and I think you're very brave to have this to make these challenges for yourself. So definitely, it's a very meaningful industry to work in, and I've been working as a consultant for 20 years. Started as an industrial designer, and then I've kind of been expanding my field of expertise along with how the art of design, or the toolbox of design, has expanded to approach more and more complex problems as well. So it's been a very interesting journey for me. Being Norwegian and working with Norwegian industry, it's been very much oriented towards business to business for me always. And I think that, and actually I'm kind of like a fusion of an industrial designer and an engineer, which is a very good fit, because country you need to work side by side with a lot of engineers, and they have a different kind of mind than what we as human-centric designers have. So just understanding each other's lingo, respecting each other's professionality is something that has been very exciting. And I would say, like, maybe 20 years ago, I kind of had to work for a long time just to deserve respect amongst the people that I work with in this many of these businesses. Whereas nowadays, it seems like designers have already navigated towards getting a more central place in the work of innovation that many companies have. So it's a completely different, it's a more grateful job being a designer and being a design thinker amongst these more, uh, these teams that are put together and assembled with many different kinds of specialists and expertises and stuff like that. So definitely, and the journey has been not only about it has been from being user focused
Mhm.
into being more, thinking about people centricity in the extended form. So it's not
Mhm.
just about the end user. Like a ship, it would probably be a captain or a machine room officer or something like that.
Mhm.
To extend it and think about all the other stakeholders and types of users in the system of the maritime industry that
Mhm.
will be affected by the stuff that we design. So expanding on all of that and try to understand the complexity of how the data is flowing and all the different contexts that all these different stakeholders need to get accommodated to is really, I would say, a more and more interesting challenge with more and more opportunities, and it's actually really fun to work within that creative space.
Yeah.
So
Most of the
that's
people in
that's
my
been my
network,
that's been my journey. And
yeah,
yeah,
most of
go
the
ahead.
people in my network are maritime people or engineers, and they haven't necessarily been exposed to uh, design and design processes. So I did a small primer on it yesterday, and this first 10 days of the 100 days project is really about getting them to have an understanding and a feel for design tools and design processes as they can be used for problem solving, much like systems engineering can be used to break down different requirements. We need to take that scope and put it on steroids if you're going to be using
Yeah,
it to really do a practice of design. And for me, I came from operations background at sea. So my whole viewpoints was engineering and operations. How do we actually
right.
just get it done? Not how
Yeah,
could it be, but how do we deal with how it is? And
yeah,
my first foray into design was actually having a workshop with you on a
right.
specific project. Because before I hadn't really gone into this user centric thing. I knew that it was important because I was a user and I hated a lot of things. But I hadn't really been introduced to design processes first with you in workshops and then taking courses and then reading a lot. And now here I am. But how
Yeah,
would you introduce this world and process of design to the kind of engineer mindset and industrial
yeah.
mindset of the kind of people that follow me and that are like I had been before?
Yes. So there are several perspectives here that I think are interesting to consider. First of all, just from an economical perspective, um, what you see is that not only for the maritime industry, but for all like these large, heavy industries, if you consider the machine or machinery or whatever it is that the industry is handling as this big black box, and there
Mhm.
is some kind of user somewhere that will actually affect the output or the impact of that big
Mhm.
black box, it's quite fascinating how little has been invested in accommodating for that user to do a good job historically,
Mhm.
compared to all the heavy investments that has been done in developing the machinery. So
Mhm.
if there's any influence at all that the user will have on the performance of all of this, it just makes sense to have more focus on the users, right? And this
Yeah.
is something that was recognized, I think, a couple of decades ago, and it was called um, human computer interaction,
Yes.
HCI, I think was the term that was being used, which is not necessarily the same as design, but it is a
No.
human orientation, right? But you
Mhm.
would educate maybe engineers or IT professionals on having a user-centered methodology, right? So
Mhm.
you would do comprehensive task flow analysis, for example, and you would try to make sure that there would be dashboards that would accommodate for the right kind of situation awareness and so forth. But
Mhm.
um, it would be a very
Superficial.
strict, not necessarily so superficial, but it wasn't. I would say it didn't take many of the emotional aspects into perspective,
Mm.
for example, or it didn't really accommodate for taking big innovative leaps. It
Mhm.
was mainly about trying to accommodate so that the system would give the user what the user would need for any point of time in that task flow. So it would only take you part of the way in a way. But I think
Mhm.
that this was a door opener for designers to come in that were already user oriented, but that would have a completely different set. not as analytical, maybe still
Mhm.
structured, but the designers originally, they were working a lot with aesthetics,
Mhm.
form and craft, and these kind of things that the word design is still associated with.
Mhm.
But designers are also pretty good at building things and visualizing things, right? So we have prototyping skills, and I think that's
Mhm.
extremely, extremely important, because a lot of people have all this, how could you say, like vague understandings or fuzzy understandings of what it is that you want. But the
Yeah.
moment a designer or some person on your team is able to visualize exactly what it is that you can get, that's the moment when your team starts aligning on the vision that you might
Mhm.
achieve.
So you
So
can
it
make
works
the
both
leap from
ways.
the horse to the car.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's a way to think about it, actually. And there's a pretty big difference, I think, between problem solving and creative, innovative processes.
Mhm.
Because problem solving is basically just rooted in however you're doing your job today and trying to improve that incrementally by solving some problems or barriers. Whereas more creative, innovative thinking is, for example, taking new technologies into consideration, or some other opportunity, business opportunity, for example, and try to experiment with completely different ways of solving these challenges, something that the users might not be asking for. And it's very
Mhm.
risky to develop these solutions unless you know that there's a fit for that solution and that you can prototype it and test it and get a feedback on these kind of solutions. And that's something that I think designers are quite well equipped to do. And because we're good at visualizing, we can also facilitate processes with multiple kind of expertises coming together in one team and
Mhm.
working together in a good way, which has been a problem before. So being a facilitator of a complex team is
Oh no. Did I lose you?
something that I think is hello,
Yeah, it froze for a second.
lost you for a second.
So
Yeah.
you said being a facilitator for a complex team, and then it froze.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's a good place for a designer to be if you want to work with creativity and innovation, because um, I think we're quite good at aligning people, and we are rarely the expert in the room. So we do need to have these kind of co-creation processes where we get to tap into other people's brains,
Mhm.
especially when working with B2B and this very um, expertise heavy contexts like maritime.
Mhm.
It's really necessary to have everyone at the table and then trying to align so that we're talking the same language and we have a common mental model of what we want to achieve.
How would you suggest, like, looking at the challenges that we're facing in the industry and kind of making that leap? Because none of what is currently existing, both as far as business models and as far as fuel sources and many other things, are going to get us where we want to go as far as SDGs and making that kind of ESG transformation that's so vital for all of humanity that we do make. How would you suggest that multiple companies or clusters in the ocean industries that interface with each other might collaborate and co-create together? Because it's not going to be like one team sitting in one room figuring this all out. As much as I would
Uh,
love to be in that position, I
yeah,
think that it's much more complex because there's so many stakeholders. But in the end, we have to get the industry to transform into something that is smooth and safe and sustainable and inclusive.
yeah.
And I think we have a long road to go. But how would you suggest kicking that off? Besides the fact that we're here having this conversation kind of
Oh,
publicly
yeah.
to try to spark some debate, I guess.
It's a tricky question, and I think that that question will become more and more relevant for the next couple of decades too, because since challenges are becoming more systemic,
Mhm.
we need to work together to solve those challenges. But not much is going to happen without a proper incentive.
Mhm.
And that incentive can come from different places. For example, changing regulations that might increase the fees on carbon footprints, for example. That will be an incentive to to save fuel, which we see is already happening. Um, or there might be other kind of reward-based incentives instead of kind of like punishment incentives. But what I have seen, for example, we're working in a project now in Sweden, which is within the energy sector. There's a governmental institution there who has the responsibility to coordinate the value chain for
Mhm.
everyone contributing to developing the battery industry in Sweden.
Mhm.
So what they're trying to do there is to create what they call a national arena
Mhm.
for many of these different potential contributors to come together and one goal of making Sweden a world leader within the battery industry
Mhm.
within the next decade. So within 10 years, they have a big job to do, and they could pull in the same direction, looking at the rest of the world as a competitor. You know,
Mhm.
competitors in, like for example, China, which is a huge competitor within that industry. So that's the incentive there. They're trying to make incentives that are a bit more um, cluster
Yep.
related, like to think as a cluster instead of an individual company,
Mhm.
um, and with an ambition of growth that will benefit all of them who work together. So that's another way to do it. But I guess traditionally
Do,
it's more on how to get a competitive advantage, right?
yeah. Do you think that with the Nordics being kind of a maritime hub in itself for both aquaculture and energy and quite a bit of transportation, whether it be bulk or gas or oil, do you think that that cluster has the opportunity to lead the way and to show how this business can be done differently? Because even if you have the regulators coming in, I was at an event for Wista Norway last week at Thomason, and they were talking about how actually some of the regulations that have just come into force are, while good intentioned to have people slow the vessels down and to use less fuel and to make less emissions, because of the way those emissions are calculated, it actually encourages them to burn more by doing ballast voyages that do no work because it's
Mm.
divided by the cargo carried. So it's
Yeah,
tons emitted per cargo. And if you have zero cargo, then you can use that in the mileage account
right.
to make your numbers look better,
Mm.
even though your behavior happens to be worse.
Right.
And we have to kind of avoid sometimes making new regulations that might have malintentioned consequences, where it could have
Yeah.
been done better, encouraging it in another way. Um,
And there will always be loopholes.
yes,
Um,
and everyone will
yeah.
find a way around it.
Yeah, yeah, of course. No, I don't know if I really believe that I know the incentives have to come from regulations or even governmental initiatives. I do believe in partnerships. I do
Mhm.
believe, like for example, I've had the pleasure of working with Kongsberg sometimes, and I know Kongsberg is quite good at doing some very specific targeted initiatives with some selected partners. And I think
Mhm.
that's very interesting. For example, the famous Yara Birkeland autonomous ship program,
Mhm.
which is very interesting. And um, I do believe that large private corporates have an enormous power to do innovation, which is what we see worldwide. It's typically coming from. Did I freeze again, or am I still
Yeah,
here?
yeah, you did freeze again.
I
You
froze again. Yeah.
froze just after you said that that large corporates have a lot of power to do innovation, and then it cut off again.
Yeah,
I do apologize for my Wi-Fi connection because I do think it's on my side. I just arrived in Croatia for vacation. It's
okay. All right. Yeah,
a
yeah,
little
no.
bit spotty on my side. I didn't know how the Wi-Fi was going to be here. Obviously, not good
Yeah,
enough. But
you look dressed for Croatian weather. Yes.
yeah,
I wasn't going to comment, but yeah. No, I was just saying that I think that they have the best position, but they also know that they can't do it alone. So many of them are becoming increasingly good at creating strategic partnerships. and
Mhm.
understanding the ecosystem of companies that they need to do things with. And this is also what we see more and more often is that our customers that want to work with circular economy, for example, they do
Mhm.
understand that we're talking about an ecosystem here, not them as an isolated company. So
Mhm.
from being, human centric in our
Mhm.
focus to being more system centric within a
Mhm.
company and work systemically within a company, we now have to be ecosystem centric for the
Mhm.
kind of impacts that we want to create that is larger than the footprint of just one single company alone.
Mhm.
And that's very interesting, and it requires even more from someone who is to facilitate that process and
Mhm.
align the goals of everyone that contributes and make sure that there's something in it for everyone who chips in.
Yeah, and that's something that I've been working on with the team at SAMS, the Sustainable Autonomous Mobility Systems, because I'm the chairman there, and we've been working
Okay.
on how do we make these sustainable autonomous systems really work, because it's many companies working together, like you quoted the Yara and also the
Hmm.
ASCO vessels. It's more than one company delivering those projects. It's many, many companies working together. And how do we make that into a real commercial enterprise where many actors have a real commercial export market there for those kind of solutions, because they're not
Right.
really products in themselves, they're solutions, because you have the port, you have the cranes, you have the vessels themselves, you have all of the logistics change connections there to communicate when things are coming, when things are going, how it might link up with rail, how it might link up with buses. There's also other members of the cluster like Hike that are doing the personnel ferries. There's so much there that requires these kind of collaborative agreements to really make something to move the world forward.
Hmm.
Which kind of got me thinking about full systems, and that's how I ended up here. um,
Yeah, yeah.
Talking about this because this is beyond the scope of my normal work, which is yeah,
Yes.
individual
No, but
products.
I've always been a fan of trying to, at least for a moment, if you have a design challenge, at least for a moment, zoom out and
Mhm.
see how that challenge fits into a bigger system. And it
Mhm.
could be, if you're designing something for a user, you would zoom out and try to understand what kind of service is somebody trying to provide to that user, and what are the other touch points in that service, and are they all working towards the same goal or not? And
Mhm.
that service within the company, what part of the strategy is that service trying to contribute with fulfilling for the company? And
Mhm.
and just zoom out, zoom out, zoom out, ask all the questions, at least spend a little bit of time to make sure that whatever you're doing there is meaningful, not only in its own isolated keyhole perspective,
Mhm.
but that it also makes sense in the context that it's going to work. It becomes more meaningful for everybody who contributes if you look at it like that.
Definitely. And now's the time for you to pitch for eggs. What would be your dream problems and dream kind of customers coming in to work on?
Yeah, I mean, what eggs is particularly good at is to work on these complex challenges that are fuzzy, maybe in an early stage where all you have is an idea or a pain, maybe,
Mhm.
or some kind of opportunity. And if it's something that chips into this, what we talked about just now, this ecosystem of players that have to work together to make something happen, maybe with utilizing a new technology that requires some prototyping and experimentation to figure out what is the most meaningful way to utilize that
Mhm.
technology. That's a dream project, no matter what kind of industry we're talking about. Of course, transformation is very interesting. For example, the energy transformation, or within logistics, working with AI, machine learning, autonomy.
Mhm.
Those kind of things are extremely exciting because we know it's all going to change the world. So
Mhm.
trying to play a part where we can make that change as meaningful and valuable as possible for the people
Mhm.
involved, I think that's far more cool than just to kind of rent a resource for a 6-month UI job, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
I'm one for the big challenges, big problems.
Yes.
But thank you for taking the time to talk with us today. People can find you online, and if you want to come back and talk about other parts of the project as we move along, because this part is on design, and the next part will be kind of exploring the different stakeholders in the industry. But later on, we're going to get to the ideation phase, which is going to be super fun. But we have to kind of lay the groundwork first. So this is the start of my sprint to June. It will end before more shipping, so we'll see how it goes and what will come out of it, because it's kind of an exploratory thing for me. I've never done something so public before.
Well, kudos to you. Kudos to you for shedding light on this topic as well. I think that's it's a good conversation.
Yeah, but thanks a lot. And if you have any other thoughts or comments, you know where to find me. And I think everyone else will be able to find you too. Yeah, for now.
All right.
Been a
well,
busy
enjoy
week.
your.
Thanks. I'll be back online tomorrow. I have 100 days to show up, so.
Good luck with that. A race.
Thanks. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Let's see how it goes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jackie.
Talk